On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of North.
What I love most about Norfolk County, I think, would be the vastness of the county, how it's big and there's breathing space, and There are so many little pockets of beauty, natural beauty.
I love the seasons here. The springtime, the rain falling on the earth. I'm a farmer, so I enjoy those aspects of it, the smell of the rain. The summer times, we have beautiful warm summers here.
You have such pristine water here. You have some of the finest cold water streams in Ontario with Big Creek and Young's Creek and others that produce great fishing.
Norfolk is very heavily forested, beautiful color in the autumn. The sun shines very brightly here in the wintertime, so I love the 4 distinct seasons we have here in Norfolk County.
What people find remarkable about Norfolk County, I think, is that our sense of community and us working together.
I think of us as a little bit of, we have these ecospheres in our store. They're these self-sustaining little balls that, completely take care of themselves. We're a little bit like that, in our area. We have so much here.
My kids grow up knowing what it's like to produce a piece of fruit or produce some food, some vegetables, and put them on the table, how much effort that takes. And I think that's important.
When people come into the shop, we pull out the map and we show them the wineries and the breweries and we tell them about the local dining in town, and we'll tell them about the lavender farm, and along the way show them produce stands that they could stop to pick up some goodies.
Everything that we want to do socially and all of our extracurricular activities are right here. And when you join groups, these people they'll want to get to know you immediately. That's our nature. We're curious and we're supportive and we're interested.
Sometimes opportunity just kind of happens when you're talking to someone and having a conversation with someone here in Norfolk. The next thing you know, you're collaborating with them on a project or activity.
The amount of people within our community that support our business is outstanding, because it's a give and take relationship. If you support everyone else, they will support you, and it makes our community that much stronger and that much better.
I think that working with the local businesses here, everyone's very welcoming. Every time I meet a new business owner, and I love to go to new stores and new restaurants that open up and introduce ourselves and welcome them to the community. It's easy to fall in love with Norfolk County.
My advice to a family that's thinking about moving here is to come and visit. Come and spend a week. Come and experience everything that we have to offer, because you're going to find an amazing quality of life.
You're 10 minutes away from a beach. You're 5 minutes away from a dog park. There's so much opportunity in an area like this for young entrepreneurs, young families, even, senior entrepreneurs that are doing that as well.
I'm very happy. I'm lucky, very lucky I can be here, It's a good place to raise family too.
We don't have this sort of slick veneer over us. We're really comfortable in our own skin, and artists are making art because they love to make art, and musicians are writing songs because they love to write songs.
And just because you're not from here doesn't mean that you can't embrace what makes Norfolk great. Sort of our diversity, the wonderful landscapes here.
And it's just a great area. You're going to meet great people. You're going to have a supportive environment. We can compete on an international stage with anybody. And that's how we have to start looking at the world.
You just have to be willing to work hard, realize the potential that there is here, and just put yourself to work and create that opportunity for yourself.
I found that as a young entrepreneur, I was given every opportunity I could want. Just put yourself out there. Go to local events, and you're going to bump into all kinds of people that are going to be, important business connections to you.
Everybody's so willing to help somebody else out. I think that's the best thing about even being a business owner in Norfolk County.
We're a small community, but there's so much support here, whether it's a restaurant or ecotourism. We just have this appetite, and if you've got a great idea, you've got a willing community that's going to get behind your idea.
Some of the advice that I would give entrepreneurs coming to Norfolk County would be to think outside of the Norfolk box, but don't forget what's in the Norfolk box. Because we have a lot to offer, we have a lot of great people, a lot of great opportunities.
Norfolk County.
Entrepreneurs grow here.
Norfolk County.
Ideas grow here.
Norfolk County.
You grow here.
You grow here.
You grow here.
On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you.
Okay, well, if everybody's good then, good afternoon and welcome to the special council meeting for April 7th. I would like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and I don't think we really have too many in attendance today, but if everybody could make their, please put their phones on silent mode. Ryan Wallace is volunteering for us, is that correct? So thanks, Ryan, for joining us as the camera volunteer. So I guess just before we get going, could somebody explain this to me? Is that Councillor Geisens I see in the bottom left corner? And Councillor Columbus? He's the trees. Okay, there he is. Perfect. All right. And then who do we have in the top right? Oh, that's Councillor Taylor. Okay, perfect. That's great. So this is our first opportunity to be able to try this out. This was something that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing introduced new rules that would allow council meetings in light of the current crisis to be conducted virtually. So 3 of our councillors have chosen to participate that way today, and it's certainly going to allow us to do that in the future. We are going to make some amendments to our bylaw just to ensure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but that'll come on a little bit in the agenda. So to get started with, I guess, you know, it's interesting. A couple days ago, I had a message on social media from an individual that ran an industrial sewing equipment company, and he was offering to sew gowns for us. And yesterday, I witnessed a furious chain of emails back and forth between he and Dr. Nastari and Marlene as they got him a pattern and samples and arranging fabrics and so on and so forth. And it was interesting. There was something about the name stood out with me, but I couldn't quite place it until just about maybe an hour ago. And I realized it was a guy that I went to high school with and I haven't seen in 20 years and didn't grow up in Norfolk County, and he doesn't live in Norfolk County now. And so somebody from far and wide offering to volunteer and, you know, donate their time to us. And you know, that's just one of the many examples that I've seen so far. Longtime residents, people that have just moved here, stepping up, you know, businesses large and small that have donated supplies and other materials that we needed. So to each and every one of those individuals, I guess first I want to say a giant thank you. To that end, we are continuing to look. Councillor Van Passen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on that note, I brought my own personalized blueberry saison hand sanitizer made by the Hometown Brew Company. They're doing their part for Norfolk County as well. And might as well throw in the fact that the Victoria and District Foundation just donated $5,000 towards the Quilters Guilds who are sewing masks for the community. So everybody's pulling together in typical Norfolk County fashion, and they're all doing their part. So.
They are indeed. Thank you for that. Yeah, there's so many, and I think we are going to work on putting a list together of all the thank yous, certainly that we owe to residents and businesses in our community. I guess, you know, when things really began to first unfold, I remembered reading a post on Facebook also criticizing us at the time for trying to source some of that PP&E and building a supply inventory and a list of volunteers. Some were more vicious than others. Some were simple, you know, they haven't even had a confirmed case yet. Why are we bothering with this? To the more aggressive, where it was, you know, how could this council not have been prepared? But I don't think anybody in the world could have been prepared with a warehouse full of the equipment that we're looking at needing for this. And so I guess why that particular comment or those comments bothered me the most is because of Shanker. And you know, we are so fortunate to have Shanker here. I can't even begin to describe to all of you. You know, when he first put out those requests for volunteers and PP&E, he wasn't doing so because he was unprepared. He was doing so because he was being very prepared, overly prepared. In fact, we were, you know, more prepared than many of the other municipalities. And I think, Shanker, if it's okay with you, would I be able to share some of the figures from the epidemiologist? Or So one of the first steps that Shanker did was he consulted with not one, but several epidemiologists, and their predictions were all pretty consistent, that a death rate in excess of 500 in Norfolk County was entirely possible. And we were looking at the numbers in intensive care. They felt could reach about 3.5 for every 1,000. And in ICU, that's where people are typically placed on a ventilator. In Norfolk County, we have 8 ventilators total between Haldimand and Norfolk, and that includes the ventilators that are being used in the ORs. And as you know, people still get sick from other things, even while there's a pandemic going on. So, you know, strategy number one from the very beginning, you know, is obviously if we can, you know, effectively execute prevention strategies, we're going to see that lower number of hospitalizations and ultimately a lower number of deaths. So strategy number one for Shanker, and he'll speak more to this, but has been about prevention and containment. And I think we've seen him lead the province and the federal government on almost virtually every step of the way. You know, he mandated quarantine before the federal government, 3 days ahead of them. We reduced the size of our gatherings before the provincial order came into effect. And so, you know, we held out for a long time, and that was great. In fact, all of our surrounding municipalities had cases identified before we did here in Norfolk County. March 26th was our first case, and the following day was our first death. That was only 12 days ago, and our numbers that have most recently been updated are showing us 109 cases today and 6 deaths with more anticipated on the way. And so, you know, Shanker knew he couldn't stop there, and so we also had to be prepared for that worst case scenario. So, you know, we started making plans to build interim treatment centers. It seems like just yesterday that, you know, Bill, I put this in an email the other day that you all saw, but, you know, we were making plans after budget to pull the ice out of the rec center to, you know, build a new senior center. And now we were pulling the ice out of arenas to be able to build these interim treatment facilities. And the purpose of those, obviously, is to create additional capacity in our hospital system. So patients that are in less critical need, now we're going to have somewhere to be able to move them out and create that additional room that we need. Since then, Shanker's also been working with local engineers to build alternative bagging machines and ventilators, and I'm assuming he'll touch more on that, but there's going to be more information to be revealed, you know, in the coming weeks. And I think one of the things that has stood out the most for me, I actually spent some time myself living in Spain, and I was speaking to a couple of really good friends the other day that I've stayed in touch with over the years, and it's a fact. If you're in Spain and you're over 65 years of age, you don't get a ventilator. And so Shanker's belief has been that anybody that needs a ventilator in Haldimand and Norfolk counties is going to have access to that. So, you know, I can't say enough how incredible he's been with all of this. Which leads me, I guess, to one of the most controversial issues so far, which has been the migrant farm worker issue. You know, to those in the West End that continue to propagate this nonsense that this council hasn't been supportive of farm workers, migrant workers coming into Norfolk County, that is patently false. In fact, I advocated and I had sent an email to all of council informing everyone, you know, we're an agricultural community, and that I intended to advocate for that exemption for the migrant workers for food production. And that is what I did. And so, you know, it's really it's unfortunate that we didn't have, you know, better, I guess, a better system in place, perhaps either from the province or at the federal level. What we had talked about was, you know, much in the way that when they repatriated Canadians off the cruise ships and they sent them all to Trenton, what an easy solution that would have been to have everybody, you know, quarantined separately. And so, you know, Shanker, we're being told currently that we're one of the only ones in the province that have this rule of a maximum of 3 workers to a bunkhouse for quarantine. And so it's pretty simple. If you can imagine, we have 110,000 people in Haldimand and Norfolk counties, and we have 8 ventilators between both counties. Can you imagine if a bunkhouse, like what they're seeing in BC right now, full of 30 migrant workers all became ill? Whose spots are they going to be taking? in our hospital system here. And again, you know, we have to be prepared, and we have to think of what the worst possible scenario could be. At the same time, it also moves to protect the farmers, because if 3 workers, or if a bunkhouse of 30 workers did become sick, they would be in extended quarantine and they still would not have received their workers. So it works 2 ways. That said, I was on a conference call with Shanker and the farmers. I listened quietly in the background so I could understand their concerns. And immediately after the phone call, I reached out to Jason and I explained some of the challenges. And I understand that, one, they needed a way to have immediate approvals, that farmers weren't in the business of organizing quarantine programs, and that some of them had large numbers that were arriving all at once, where 3 to a bunkhouse might not be the most feasible. So we immediately moved to create a program, which would be effectively like what had gone on in Trenton, of a quarantine hotel program where Norfolk County would look after all of the administration and all of the enforcement. In fact, we had even worked with our economic development department with Chris Garwood and looked at Norfolk County being able to front the cost, so it freed up a farmer's cash flow until they could figure out a way to pay for the cost of doing this. So the only thing that were going to be billed was for the hotel rooms and the meals for the workers. We invited 2 members from the agricultural community to join us on that task force. And ultimately, and I think it was the wrong decision, but we were told that the farmers would prefer to submit their individual plans. And as a result, we abandoned all the work that we had done to that end. However, in spite of all of that, the farmers have been submitting their individual bunkhouse plans. And sorry, Marlene, again, that number I just had a second ago. As of today, 1,256 workers have been approved for 112 different employers. So that leads me, I guess, to my next point, which is bylaw enforcement. And as I'm sure you're all aware, that's going to be one of our biggest challenges through all of this. We have 1,600 square kilometers in Norfolk County to patrol. And so what we've decided to do, we've actually, in addition to our bylaw staff, we have our public health inspectors, and we've also converted our building inspectors. Obviously, we don't have a lot going on in that area, so we've transitioned them over to bylaw, and you're going to be seeing more of them in the coming days. As far as emergency food program, I just had Heidi send me a message here. She's been doing an amazing job, and she just writes that the emergency food program has been providing individually packaged meals, groceries, and other essentials to vulnerable people who have been isolated due to COVID-19. The service was specifically designed to assist seniors age 70 and older, people with disabilities, and others who don't have the support system in our community. Haldeman and Norfolk Social Services is working with community partners and volunteers to deliver this service, and greatly appreciates everyone's assistance to support those in need. She says that they have been receiving calls daily from residents in Haldeman and in Norfolk, and to date have been able to meet all of the needs that have been requested. So I guess there's a few other pieces that I want to touch on. We'll get Jason to do an update for us on the financial side of things, and Shanker is going to talk a little bit more about the health piece right now.
How's that? Members of council, Mayor Chop, normally I address you as a member as the Board of Health, but this is a change for sure. First and foremost, thank you for allowing me to share the perspective of the Public Health Service. There are about 100 staff in the Public Health Service working to support programs and services in Haldeman and Norfolk County. We've really had to shift our focus, and essentially almost all of our focus, to COVID-19. I also want to share that the counties of both Haldeman and Norfolk have assigned all the staff that they have available to effectuate a plan, and I think that's been really helpful to bring our plan forward. I just wanted to share a few remarks, and Madam Chair, if I go on too long, cut me off. First and foremost, most people who get COVID-19 will have a mild to moderate respiratory illness. and they will have a cough and a fever, and they'll feel unwell, and they'll have muscle aches, but the vast majority will recover at home. A small group of people who develop COVID-19 will go to the hospital, and some of them will be admitted to the hospital, and some will go on a ventilator and be in the ICU, and some will succumb. But the vast majority of those people who have very significant side effects are usually older people with multiple medical problems. And so we have to think of, well, what is our strategy? Our strategy is really to break the chain of transmission. And it's true for COVID-19, and it's true for other infectious diseases. So one chain of transmission could be that somebody arrives from overseas on a plane, they go through Toronto Airport, they come and stay in Norfolk County, they transmit the disease to their child goes to visit, goes to a daycare center, that child then interacts with the mother, and then the mother gives it to the father, and the father goes visits his grandfather, and now we have a case where someone might die. So really, all of the self-isolation and all of our strategies are inconvenient to young people and children with the hopes that the benefit will be to the elderly. So stated another way, what we're really doing is we're, as a culture, as a county, as a group of people, is inconveniencing young people so that someone else's grandparent might benefit. So I think that we have to place this in context. Now, how are we addressing COVID-19? Well, the first and most important thing is prevention. And prevention, it means that we identify, isolate, and test every person who we think is in the risk group. And we're doing that. And although we see the numbers every day, and they're doubling probably every few days, the vast majority of people who have a positive test are already on self-isolation. So even before the positive test, they're already getting the treatment as if they had a positive test. The second thing is that we want to keep the emergency departments and the hospitals functioning, because those are vital community resources. And one of the goals is not to have people go to the hospital for testing when they don't need testing, but we also provide testing in some organized manner. So a couple of things have happened in the health district, and this is really because of the cooperation of the hospitals, the Delegated Community Health Center, local physicians, is there is organized testing for COVID-19 in the community. It happens every week. We do it quietly and discreetly in an organized manner, so people have access to testing. We do contact tracing. So if someone is recognized to have COVID-19, then we try to find their close contacts, people they might have transmitted the illness to, and isolate them and test them as clinically appropriate. That also prevents the spread of COVID-19. So there's an entire, and that's just a partial list of all the things that we do to try to identify and prevent the spread of COVID-19. The one thing I'd share is that we do everything we can to protect the privacy of the people that interact with the public health service. That's true for COVID-19, that's true for sexually transmitted illnesses, it's true for other diseases of public health significance. So we always have to balance the fact that people want to know, which is important, but also the fact that there are people on the side who can be identified. That's a really hard balancing act sometimes, and there's certain things that are known publicly in a smaller community that we at the Public Health Service will not confirm, because people are free to speak as in any free country, they're free to speak, but the Public Health Service will not disclose, will not confirm or disclose certain items. The second item, I think, is that social distancing. The reason social distancing is important is that if you stay far enough away from another person, you're less likely to transmit COVID-19. COVID-19 is primarily transmitted through respiratory droplets, coughing, sneezing. So if we can keep people away from each other, then there's a lower chance of transmission. And it breaks the chain. It breaks the chain from a young person to a middle-aged person to a senior. And so I would encourage social distancing. Whenever we effectuate public health management plans, it's a multi-layered approach. The first and most important is we need the support of our constituents, the people. If people don't believe we're doing the right thing, we'll never be able to effectuate a public health management plan. We need education and dialogue. And to that extent, the Public Health Service has taken 3,000 phone calls since the beginning of all of this. That's about 3% of the people who live in the health district have called the Public Health Service and we try to return every call we really work to try to return it that day. Ownership. This is a community problem. This is not a problem for the Public Health Service, it's a problem for all of us collectively. Laws and rules. I loathe writing public health orders, but if that's what it takes, that's what we'll have to do. And then there's enforcement. And all of those together effectuate a public health management plan. In some cases, the plan is, an order is the right thing, a formal legal process. And we work with the legal counsel to formulate orders that we think we can defend if they're appealed. But one key message, and I would ask this, is that if you do not live in Haldimand or Norfolk County and this is not your residence, please stay at home. This is a response to everybody. Every person should stay at home unless they have a compelling reason to leave the house. If you have a summer home or a cottage in Haldimand and Norfolk County and you otherwise live in another community, stay in that community. And I think that's an important, an additional important goal. We have closed the parks and trails and other areas where people congregate, not because we want people to be dissatisfied, but it's another way to try to effectuate social distancing. So one is prevention, second is social distancing, and the third is what are we going to do if we do have an influx of cases? So I think we have to be available to support the hospitals and other institutions as best as we can. And to that extent, the board of the two counties have activated their emergency operations centers, and among the things they've done is to try to set up additional capacity for medical services. Ultimately, that will require close cooperation between the hospitals and the county. But as you know, there are two separate, we would call them interim care facilities. What's not always known is the county has always been a provider of health services. It owns two long-term care homes. The ambulance service and the paramedic service are county sponsored. So it's just merely an extension of other county function. Finally, I want to talk briefly about the sickest of sick patients. So there are people who go to the hospital and have mild and moderate symptoms of COVID-19. If they're admitted, we will manage them symptomatically. That means that we'll do what we can to support them. If they have a fever, you give them Tylenol. If they're short of breath and don't have oxygen, you give them supplemental oxygen. If they're having pain, treat their pain. If they're coughing, use their cough effectively to clear secretions. But a small group of people will go on a ventilator. And there are three groups of people in this county working to actually try to build ventilator capacity. And I think that their work will lead to some level of some mitigation of that challenge. I want to share with you that the county found 15 very basic ventilators in its stores that they didn't throw out. So that's 15 extra ventilators that are available at least for the short term that can help people. And then there are perhaps more sophisticated ventilator supplies that might come online. The province has also indicated they've ordered commercial ventilators, so hopefully that will come online. There's two final things I want to close with, and if Ms. Chop would indulge me. First of all, many of the people who will get COVID-19 are elderly and are in the twilight of their life. If someone's in the twilight of their life, independent of COVID-19, they need to have a good management plan. So not every elderly person wants assertive or overly aggressive treatments, if they get pneumonia or they get influenza or they get COVID-19. And so that should continue on, notwithstanding the challenge, this very serious public health emergency we have now. And I would ask everyone to have that dialogue with their family today, especially among those who have elderly relatives. Secondly, people, from my estimation, people who require ICU care should get ICU care. I think that's a public health priority, and that is the foundation of Medicare, that people who are sick should get treatment, and money should not be the reason why they don't get treatment. But in context, one of the things to think about is if one needs intensive care unit services, not only do they need the ventilator, but they also need all the supplies that go along with that. The intubation tube, the disposable items, the drugs that paralyze them and sedate them, and the staff, most importantly, the nurses and physicians and respiratory therapists to support those devices. So as we build capacity throughout the province, And let's hope that we never get to that point where we're short of ventilators or short of ICU care. We need to have a plan, I think, as a matter of public policy to cover all of those items. In closing, this is my 30th year of practice. I lived through HIV. I lived through it. I lived through the crisis. In my practice, we lived through H1N1. Our province got through SARS. This is going to be a difficult few months, but I think that if we work together, the counties, the hospitals, community health centers, physicians, practitioners in the community, I think we'll be able to get through these next 3 months and hopefully have something more positive to look forward to in a few months. Thank you, Ms. Chop. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you, Shanker. The other person that deserves a giant thanks that's sitting here right now too is Marlene. I tell you, if I hear from Marlene and Shanker for the nightly update before 9 o'clock, that's a miracle. Usually it's 10 p.m. or so. They're still sitting in the office here day in and day out. So a huge thank you to you too, Marlene, for everything you've done. Did you have anything you wanted to add with?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Dr. Nissether and yourself have covered most of it. Thank you.
Thanks. So with that, just a couple of other thanks before we bring Jason out here as well. I mean, all of the staff, you have to understand, we're still running, our day-to-day operations, things that need to be done in our water department and our wastewater department. The county is still a moving entity, and so a huge thank you to all of our staff, and a massive thank you to all of our frontline staff that are out there. I think this is a pretty grim reminder of the thanks that they are deserved. And I also just wanted to, extend, I think, our thoughts and prayers from all of council to all of the members and families that have been affected by COVID-19. The situation at Anson obviously it's just tragic. We have many residents and staff members, as I'm sure you've read in the paper now with the numbers. And, I think that the staff really have stepped up. Maybe you could just touch on that a little bit, Shanker, in terms of even the volunteers from the paramedics that have offered to work.
Sure. So, the people at Anson Place, they've had some immense challenges with the outbreak over there. I think that the staff, so if I could share what has happened at Anson Place since the outbreak. When the outbreak was declared, all the staff were put on isolation, and they ate their meals in their rooms. So that minimizes the chance of one sick resident giving the illness to another sick person. Secondly, all the staff at Anson Place wore gowns and gloves and masks and eye protection, full personal protective equipment. So that minimized the chances of a staff member giving it to a resident. All the individuals at Anson Place who had tested positive for COVID-19 were excluded from working there. The staff that are currently working there are self-isolating themselves. I think that's an extraordinary contribution. So not only are they wearing personal protective equipment, but they go from home to Anson Place and back home. That's it. And they stop for gas, but that's it. And the administration at Anson House, for those people who couldn't self-isolate, put people up in a hotel. So I think that they have done, and they have followed the public health recommendations from the very beginning. The county doesn't own Anson Place, it's its own independent institution, but they've taken our advice on that. For staffing, the county's Emergency Operations Center was able to identify a list of volunteers, and this is Haldeman County's Emergency Operations Center. And some of those paramedic students had volunteered to work, and they were actually getting paid, but they took positions. So the latest report I have is that 2 of them are working there at Anson Place. Anson Place is also hiring additional staff to try to help with the workload. All that being said, the people who work there are doing a yeoman's job. And quite honestly, it's a job I don't think I could do. And they're doing it with extra shifts and extra hours. So I give them lots of credit for trying to make the best of a very challenging situation. Is that sufficient?
That's great. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, I guess then if that's all from the public health side of things, maybe we'll bring Jason back out. We'll have you guys switch seats and oh, Shanker, sorry, one more thing before you leave. One of the questions we keep receiving from individuals that want to know why we aren't separating the numbers between Haldimand and Norfolk counties and sort of that balancing act with patient confidentiality.
So from my perspective, and I'm pleased to to attend Norfolk Council today, but formally I report to the Board of Health, which is concurrently you, I might add, but so we're one health district. The Board of Health represents both Haldimand and Norfolk and the people who reside in both of those communities. It's a small community, and we really resist providing data that might identify people. So when we talk about individuals who've developed COVID-19, I don't share much with members of the Board of Health because unless we think it's a public health matter, we won't confirm the names or the events. We'll just talk about them as factual items. We typically don't disclose the age, and we try not to disclose the gender. Of course, sometimes we might make a mistake, but so we're doing everything we can to protect the privacy of the people. And so that is the primary reason we don't separate out by city or by county, recognizing that even now we have a relatively small number of cases, and if we were to separate that out, eventually that might lead to the identification of certain people. It is theoretically possible that a family might, and I'm neither confirming or denying that, but if you were to say one family, that could lead to an identification. So given all of that, we're hesitant to release county by county or more granular data towards that goal. I know it's frustrating because it is a source of interest, but I think that when we balance the privacy issues versus the public health issues that we would like to disclose, we'll try to not disclose those kind of data elements.
Great. Thanks, Shanker. Thanks, Marlene. Can you go? Unless you want to stay, we could put Jason over there.
Okay.
So interesting meeting for a first meeting as a new CAO. But yes, Councilor. No, you're fine. You're fine. So just before we turn over to Jason to take over his first meeting as CEO, I think on behalf of all the council, I want to send a big thanks out to Bill Cridlin, who really stepped up and has had a wild ride himself the last few months, from unprecedented budget deliberations to now a global pandemic. So a huge thank you to Bill for everything he's done, and a welcome to Jason. So I guess if maybe we could get a financial sort of, or kind of what's being done on the finance side of things from you, that'd be.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. Some of the numbers I'll present to you today, I'll provide in a little bit more detail in the weekly update. But and I do want to caution all of council that these numbers are very preliminary, and there's a lot of assumptions that underlie these numbers. What staff and management are doing is we're doing scenario planning. So to better estimate what this may cost the county, we're picking dates where we think the county may return to normality, and we're in that. And once you pick that date, you kind of can then figure out, well, what's the additional cost of this pandemic? What are the lost revenues that we have from not being able to operate our facilities? What's the additional cost associated with having some of our programs closed? So we're working through two scenarios on the forecast, and like I said, they're preliminary, but we're estimating the cost for Norfolk County to be between $3.6 and $4.6 million of additional cost and lost revenue. Staff has identified cost savings, and we'll be putting in some cost savings activities this week. But even with the cost savings, we're identifying about $2.5 million, which would leave a hole of more than $1 million easily. We'll probably far exceed that based upon these early projections. If the situation gets worse and some of the things that we've prepared for that we hope we don't use gets used, the costs increase at that point in time. So on a $100 million levy budget, this could be a 2%, 3% hit. As this council is well aware, we don't have the financial reserves to absorb that type of hit, and so we will have to make contingency planning for that financial cost. I also want to say that the county has taken some steps for the safety of the employees, where we've, as this council knows, we put a number of employees that were deemed non-essential on a administrative leave, and we fully paid for their salaries for 2 weeks. That leave is coming up, as some councillors have asked questions about that. There will be a plan going forward because there are a number of employees that won't have work to continue. The county will do all the things necessary to keep as many people employed as possible. That's our first obligation, is to make sure if there's productive work to be done, we can do the productive work. That requires some of our staff to be reallocated to tasks that they don't normally do, that are higher priority. But there will be some staff that even after those reallocations, there won't be work to do. As has happened across the province of Ontario, there have been significant layoffs in the municipal sector, and we will have some layoffs for that. But as a leading organization in the county, what we wanted to do was minimize the impact to staff, and we're going to take measures to do that so that there is some financial support for any members that have to be laid off. So that's the unfortunate side of this transaction too. There's a dollars and cents side, but there's also clearly a human impact side, and we take that very seriously as a management team. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the financial aspect.
Any questions from any of the councillors? Mike, do you have your hand up? Sorry, I don't get. Go ahead. Me too.
Through the mayor to the councillor, if we do have winter savings, we can throw that to this cause. The one risk we do run is we have two ends of a winter season, and if we capture too much of those savings from the January to April time period, if we run into issues in the fall, we'll be there. The one thing, if you remember from the budget approvals, we approved that starting in the fall, we will reduce our standards for snow clearing to the provincial standards, and there may be some savings there. So we have not factored those in these calculations at this point in time. It's something we would evaluate later in the year. So the numbers that I've said doesn't include that at this point in time, only because we're not, we don't know whether all those costs are there. What I'm hopeful of is, yes, there will be some savings on winter maintenance.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. To Mr. Burgess. So is it safe to say that since the beginning of this pandemic, staff have been keeping accurate financial reporting from cost-saving measures as well as spending, and is this something that we could expect to receive additional funding potentially from the government down the road once we're in this emergency situation, and I guess further, is there enough tracking of it since the beginning?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor, once the EOC is initiated, there's very specific forms that fall under the EOC, and if Shelley Darlington was here, she'd tell me the names of the forms. But that way, everything is tracked. So all the approvals are tracked. Everything is very specifically tracked to this epidemic cause or this emergency situation. All employees also have a COVID-19 time code that they are to allocate their time to. And we are tracking that. We are actively managing and monitoring overtime costs. We're trying to minimize overtime costs. And so we, by looking at different ways to plan our work and do our work, but, unfortunately in an emergency situation, overtime will occur, and we'll have to deal with that. But the short answer to your question is yes, we do extensively track the cost. The challenge with it is everyone is dealing with this in real time, and things are flying very quickly, and there's a delay between getting the numbers and when I can report on them. So we do make some estimates in these numbers, but when this is all said and done, there'll be a full accounting exactly for those costs. As far as your question with regards to provincial funding, obviously there is no announcement on provincial funding for this to the municipalities. We are making financial plans and assumptions. I will be blunt with you. I am not making any assumptions that we will get any relief from the province of Ontario or from the federal government. Both the province and the federal government have put out incredible amounts of money into the system. The province has doubled their projected deficit for this year. For them to add more programming on is not something I would count on at this point in time.
Councillor Huffman. Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to Mr. Burgess. So in terms of the funding, not anticipating anything from the federal or provincial government, and I do recognize the immense amounts of funding that both levels of government have put into the province and the country as a whole. Is there not possibly some flexibility with the fact that municipal governments are the only government that is not allowed to run a deficit? So would there possibly be something that might fall under that category? And I'm sorry, my back is to you.
No, that's quite fine, Councillor Huffman. Through the chair to the councillor, there is discussions at various levels of government to allow for municipalities to have more leniency on a one-year deficit, and that is a possibility. The challenge with any deficit is you still need a plan to make it back up in the following year and to deal with it in the following year. And depending on the length of this emergency, I think the longer this goes and the longer we're requiring additional expenditures, I think there will be more leniency given on that issue. And I don't want to minimize both the federal government and the provincial government have provided funding to us, but they're directly related to dealing with the COVID-19 situation. It's not going to offset some of the other costs we have. So to be clear, we've received significant funding to deal with, issues for those of that are economically challenged. And, there will be some memorandums coming out to you for information how we're going to spend that money. So there is funding coming out, but it's to go directly to citizens of the county, not to deal with our financial situation.
And just one more question. I understand the fluidity of this entire situation, and just looking at your comment that layoffs will be coming, is there a time that employees would be notified? What is the time frame that employees would be notified if they're going to be laid off?
Thank you. Through the chair, we'll be notifying this week of the layoffs, and HR is working on that right now. And they're also calculating the cost of the additional cost to the county for the additional benefits we're going to provide the employees for that. And even with a layoff, to be very clear, our layoff is going to be used under a declared emergency leave layoff, which maintains, it's like a protected layoff, as if you're going on maternity leave. So we will continue to pay benefits, and we will, their jobs are protected, all that. So it's not like a traditional layoff. This is just for the emergency period. And we'll, there are programs out there for people who are laid off out of this that the federal government has put out significant funding for and make the applications easier. So that's the intent, is to allow them to move to that while cushioning the impact somewhat to the worker.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have great confidence in our staff, and they'll be tracking everything, finding the total cost, doing the best to minimize a deficit potential. But are we willing to look a little further than that and think about the ability of the taxpayer to pay, whether there's more wiggle room to sort of cut down our needs in the first place, and try to maybe slow down the pain on the taxpayer themselves with the way the economy is running? There's going to be a lot of people a little bit short on the income at the end of the year as well. And is there room to relook at the budget from that point of view? And I know we built in some increases to try to rebuild our reserves. Now that's a process, is there a possibility that we sort of shift that process for one more year and try to sort of reduce our needs right from the beginning? And I just, hoping that you're willing to look at all options that way.
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Passen and council, at this point in time, I'm not going to exclude any option. What we are trying to do is find what we can do to live within the approved budget and move on that. There will likely be deferrals of capital projects and pick up some savings. It's just the amount of savings we're being able to identify is less than the increased cost we're incurring. So that's the hole we have to fill. What I will say is management is very cognizant of the impact to the taxpayer. And it's a double whammy. It's the pure cost of the taxpayer, but you're also, frankly, the taxpayer and the community is hurting economically, and the impact to how the economy rebounds is something that we have to be cognizant of. And I'm not viewing this as a one-year item, to be frank. I'm viewing this as a multi-year recovery plan that we're going to have to do. So, next year, our budget ask needs to be significantly adjusted for what comes out of the economic damage from what's going on in the province today. So, but short answer is we'd look at that, and I think it also significantly impacts our budget expectations for next year also.
Any further questions? Anyone on TV? No? Okay. I guess, Jason, could you maybe just for council just touch on what the province did in terms of suspending the collective agreements for healthcare workers?
I will try as best as I can on that issue, not with full recognition. I'm not a HR expert or a lawyer, but the province, because of the nature of the emergency and the demand on healthcare workers in this emergency, the province essentially put out an order that effectively suspended the rights under the collective bargaining agreements on how work can be dealt with and allocated and all that, to free up as much flexibility to hospitals and municipalities to ensure that the work that needed to be done could be done. So our public health team is looking at different strategies to ensure that they bring the best to bear on this emergency. So there are potential changes happening in how we do the work in public health. And to be frank, even though we don't have that level of provincial authority for areas outside of public health, we are in discussions with various unions to look at doing our work differently in different aspects of the corporation. for a variety of reasons. One is to deal with the emergency. Two is to provide better safety, frankly, for our employees. If we can break them into teams, have them work different shifts, but still do the same number of hours, but do it with less people being exposed at any one point in time. Those are the types of things we are, looking at doing. With collective agreements, we have to obviously work through the unions on that, but what I would say is that the EOC team and the public health team in particular are looking at all options on making sure that we bring the best to bear against, in this fight against COVID-19.
Thanks. Any further questions from anyone? All right. I guess we'll move on then through the agenda for now. First of all, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? All right, seeing none, we've got the reports of committees, council and committee minutes, open and closed March 10th, 2020. There's no items from the March 10th meeting that were pulled for discussion. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Michelli. All those in favor? That's carried. Then moving on to staff reports, discussion items. The first report is staff report CAO 20-08. That's in regards to emergency electronic council participation. And I guess, Andy, is that going to be you?
Sure.
You're so far away now.
Yeah, it's unusual. Thank you, Mayor Chop. This report is before you present the option of electronic participation. It's important to note at the outset, especially for our members on the TV screen there, that if council doesn't approve this, you'll still be allowed to participate for the duration of this meeting. So we won't cut your feed if it's over, if this gets voted down. There have been some, since this report was drafted, Council Services has been in contact with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and clerks from other municipalities. We've also been working with IT to develop plans and processes and best practices. There have been some recent developments on the municipal front in terms of electronic meetings that I just highlight for council members. The one is the meeting software Zoom that a lot of Ontario municipalities began adopting has encountered significant hacks in the last week. So a lot of municipalities are now rethinking the software that they initially utilized. There's been a mix of adoption with online meetings. Some councils are opting to recess for this period, but more councils are actually beginning to resume meetings now. Although rare, some municipalities are moving to entirely online meetings, so no physical aspect at all. A lot of councils are either discouraging the public attendance or not permitting them, as is our case. We're lucky to have one member of the media here from the Reformer, Monty Sonnenberg. At this time, Council Services is suggesting that the current break continue until the April 21st meeting, so we canceled the March 24th, and we're suggesting that Council resume its business on April 21st. This will allow us to get the technology in place to hear deputations and the public, as well for public hearings at our May meetings. This period will also provide the opportunity for us to test these systems with members of the Public Hearings Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, the Police Services Board, and CIC. Staff are recommending that on May 5th, the county resume to hear public hearings to prevent backlogs. We're also recommending that the C of A begin to meet again in May. There are a number of municipalities that canceled C of A and planning meetings in April, so this approach is fairly consistent with what we're seeing elsewhere. As part of what we're suggesting, that we're suggesting that the advisory committees continue to be on hiatus at least till June. I do know there are some volunteer and citizen members out there that would like to hold and participate in meetings during the month of May. However, our analysis indicates that these would be non-essential meetings at this time, so we recommend that the county not resource them. If advisory group members have some comment for council, they could send it on to your group email for consideration. Also, web streaming is currently our way of allowing the public to review proceedings. So until we get the technology further developed, all meetings will be held in the council chambers to ensure that the public can access them. In terms of the various options for electronic participation, council may want to consider also that there's a general gray area I should highlight. The Ombudsman's Office of Ontario has yet to comment upon how they will rule in respect to denying access by the public to meetings. With a number of municipalities, that have denied public attendance to chambers, we're very safe there. So that's kind of the standard approach that's being used. Municipalities that are going entirely electronic likely have a much easier approach in terms of the implementation of technology. It's easier to go all physical or all electronic, but the problem is that they have significantly weaker grounds under sections 238 and 239 of the Municipal Act. So the hybrid approach that we're doing is kind of the standard approach we're seeing municipalities do, and we just want a little bit more time to make sure that we get the aspects of when citizens either teleconference in or video conference in for our deputations and delegations. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Andy? Okay, in that case, somebody wish to make a motion to move staff recommendation or an alternative? Councillor Huffman? Seconded by, don't all jump up at once, Councillor Michelli. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? And that's carried. And I think actually in your new procedural bylaw, though, you wanted recorded vote. Was that correct with everyone on screen?
Yes, so when we drafted the procedural bylaw, we weren't sure if we can see them now physically, but we weren't sure if it would be teleconferencing. But yeah, recorded vote would be preferential, so I could do that now. Yeah. So Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Michelli.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
And Mayor Chop.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Terrific. Thank you, Mayor Chop. This report, like the previous one, was drafted around March 21st, so it kind of demonstrates how quickly things have evolved, as it's somewhat dated. At that time, we were really week to week and a half into the reality of the COVID emergency, so there were a lot of uncertainties, both for myself and other municipalities, upon whether councils would continue to meet. We have a clearer picture now. Although some councils are recessing, most are getting back to business and resuming their meetings at this time. So despite this resumption of meetings, the delegation of additional authority to the CAO during an emergency is a good approach for council to consider. It provides a safety net for business continuity and long-term planning in case the emergency changes in quick or unforeseen ways. It also allows some flexibility as the county continues to adjust to our new business processes during this potentially prolonged emergency. My experience is that with these types of delegations, they're used very sparingly by the CAO. Mr. Burgess can speak to this, but I do know that he would not use his authority to approve something of any significant interest to council. There's also the requirement for public reporting, which ensures accountability and transparency. The term of this delegation would be until the emergency is terminated by the mayor and council. I would add that we will be working to determine whether there are ways to provide information to council members during this other ways to provide information to council members during this emergency. Staff are focusing upon essential services and emergency response, so we may be accepting more memos on agendas or utilizing councilors' emails to provide them with information reports. All this is to say that the county isn't operating in a business as usual manner right now, so our agendas and reports to councils may alter somewhat to support the reduced staff. With that, myself or Jason would be happy to answer your questions.
Jason, did you want to speak to that at all, or?
Sure, yeah, just as Andy had said, you know, the intent of this is to just provide a bit of a backstop in case something needs to be done and we don't have the timing for council. And the intent is anything that it would do, use the authority for would be items that council has already turned their mind to and made decisions. So if it's within a budget that council has already approved, to ease up on the administrative burden of bringing reports to council on matters like that, we'd be able to move quickly on that. But if it is matters that are fresh to council with critical decisions, that would be something that we would bring to council. Additionally, I do want to note that there's also, the mayor has different powers under the Emergency Act to act quickly on items that relate to the emergency specifically. So this relates more to items that are outside that scope.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, I direct my question towards Jason. I've heard quite a bit of speculation in terms of how long the emergency could persist. Toronto is planning for 12 weeks. I believe that was announced on Monday in terms of countermeasures. We've been told that the economic impact could last a matter of years, and that many in the health community are planning for the repercussions to go on for a matter of years before things might return to normal or whatever the new normal may be. Without a date on when we could maybe review these expanded powers again, or, you know, I'm just wondering from your perspective, is this to the next budget? Should we put a date on when we could revisit this item? At least for the lame duck period during the election, you know, we had a date where we were driving towards there would be a new council, there would be, you know, a new normal set in place with regards to that lame duck period. I was just wondering if there's any outlook on terms of timelines or when we think we might be in a business as normal, you know, state, or if this is something that's even, you know, a relevant question at this point in time to be asking.
I think if everybody across the country stayed home for a couple of weeks, perhaps we could get back to business as normal a little bit quicker, but maybe, Jason, you have a better answer than that.
Through the chair, who clearly put a plug in for from her position as chair of the Board of Health there, it is difficult to predict how long this is going to last. I think the intent here is to attempt to resume some normality to council meetings and not use this as much as possible. But when I use the term normality, I want to put that in quotes because our staff are obviously very dedicated to other things, so our reports will be shorter, as Andy has described, memo format, that kind of stuff. So it won't be as robust of reporting potentially to it, and we may look at other items. So the intent is, as long as the emergency is in place and our resources are, as long as the EOC is in place and active, we're going to have to adjust to that. But I think the intent is to try to have, you know, some more regular council meetings to deal with matters. But if we can't, and there's a matter that's required, this allows the corporation to undertake some actions without council approving. However, I do have to report back, so council is well aware of anything that I do approve under the act or under this bylaw.
Thank you for that, Jason. And just one more follow-up. We did receive the information memo about some expenses incurred to date or some projections about those. I wanted to provide, maybe now would be a good opportunity just to share some details with regards to Shelley Darlington's memo that was introduced just yesterday, and it had some expenses incurred to date. You know, a question that I was wondering is, you know, with what we're set to approve, was there any items that you were unable to move on that you did have to follow up with the mayor or someone that was able to execute maybe a purchase? Is there maybe a specific item that you could highlight that you feel that you had your hands tied? Perhaps as an example, just to show the public, you know, how important what we're voting on today is in terms of having business continuity.
Through the chair to the councillor, what I would say is that once the EOC is established, all those purchases are done as quickly as possible. If you look at PPE, what's going on right now, we get quotes for PPE at one price, and then 2 hours later it's a different price. And so we have to lock down decisions very quickly. So essentially all those $651,000 of expenditures were all decisions made through the EOC process, and you know, most of them would have been done with turnaround times of 24 hours or less. There's investigation that goes on, not to make it sound like, oh, all we do is find the first thing on the shelf. We do go and source different quotes and that, but once we find something, we need to move quickly on it. And we've even ordered stuff, frankly, that we get notices that says, oh, hey, your masks that you ordered and paid for have been diverted. You know, we'll get back to you in a few weeks' time. So therefore, we have to go and order additional masks, and we'll put additional bids out there just to make sure we have the equipment we can have. So all those $651,000 is all items that were deemed to be essential to the EOC and to the public health and required, immediate approval. And that's why the EOC, that's why when you enact an EOC, it's to make sure you can act very quickly with good oversight, frankly, with public health oversight and mayor's oversight on all those items. But that's the intent of that.
Any further questions? Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it is my understanding that this only is in effect as long as the state of emergency is in effect, right? So, but I do have one little technical question on the actual bylaw itself, like page 26, and then also on page 100. Number 3A, financial signing authority for expenditures up to and exceeding $50,000. That doesn't make sense. Like it's either up to 50 or it exceeds 50, but you can't approve both, can we?
Sure.
Through you, Mayor Chow, that's simply for sake of time of getting something turned around rather quickly on this. I used the template from the lame duck bylaw. So that's related to the provision there of that council at that time can't approve anything of more than $50,000. So that was just a weird kind of abbreviation in that wording, but it also fits kind of nicely with our other emergency delegated authorities because it also has that $50,000. But I agree with you; it is strangely worded. It should just say assigning authority for expenditures.
It should say that they can exceed $50,000 because 50,000 is the normal, right?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the public watching at home and for real clarity, this additional delegated authority is only for our Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Jason Burgess, only.
That's correct. Any questions on Councillor Columbus, Councillor Geisens, Councillor Taylor? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with this one. The Ontario government, because of this coronavirus outbreak, has given us some powers to use electronic meeting arrangements. And also, we can do recorded votes, so that's what they're looking for. So, I feel that councillors and the mayor have been given responsibility, and we are basically abdicating our responsibility here because we do have an electronic media form that we can use to make our decisions. Nothing to say anything against Mr. Burgess, who's been on the job for a week. I fully trust that he's capable of doing that, but I'm just thinking that we're abdicating our responsibility because we have the tools to make these things work. If anything, I would certainly make sure that it would not go beyond our summer break period. That's one of the stipulations. I think we need a meeting before the summer break. Thank you.
If I can, I think that we certainly will have meetings before the summer break. That's the intention. So provided that we have the time, that was what Mr. Burgess and Andy mentioned earlier, was that we would schedule a council meeting and we would hold those meetings. But in the event that, as he discussed, we need to make purchases more quickly, especially in terms of PP&E and so on, that this would allow that to happen. So the idea is not to use it exclusively, but only when time doesn't permit for calling council meetings.
Okay, I heard someone say, would it be till the next budget? And I thought, geez, that's a long way away, so that was one of my concerns.
Do you want to clarify that for him so he can hear?
Thank you. And to clarify, I posed that as a question, Councillor Columbus. So I was projecting, how long could it go on for, a matter of months or years? And the answer was as long as we have a declared state of emergency, this bylaw would be in effect.
Jason.
I have a question. I've got a page.
1 second, Roger. So, Roger, 1 second. Jason.
Yeah, and through the mayor to council, I just want to be clear is the bylaw gives me the authority, but it's always at my discretion. And to be clear and straightforward with council, my initial disposition is always to take things to council. So this would only pop up as if, in my discretion, we can't get the council assembled. There's a variety of reasons why, even though you may have electronic meetings, why you might not be able to get a council assembled to make a decision. So my go-forward position is always to deal with items in front of council, and this is purely just a backup situation. And I would expect, if I make a decision, when I report it to you, council would hold me to account as to why I didn't take it to council. And I think I'm under that obligation to report to council why I may have made a decision and open up to criticism for that. So I just want to be very clear that my intent is not to use this power very often. It's to limit the use of it in only required situations.
Councillor Geisens.
Well, it's okay, something you'll deal with that later on, I guess. The only thing I have is my, here, every page is 5, so if you want to find what you want to have, you got to go look in another place. So I'm wondering why do you all have 5?
Any questions about this, Roger?
Well, yeah, I don't know where it came from, the 5, right down to the very last page. So I don't know what's happening, I guess. And why it's there that way, or is it just somebody made something wrong, or whatever it is. I've never had one of those, so that's the only thing I wanted to talk about. We'll look after it later, I guess.
Through you, Mayor Chop, yes, my apologies, Councillor Geisens. So we had an issue. We're kind of adjusting our resources like many areas of the corporation. We had a bit of an issue with the printing of the agenda. All the pages ended up with number 5. I know Councillor Michelli had the good joke that he read it for 2 hours and couldn't get past page 5. So for those in physical attendance, we reprinted the agenda with the correct page numbers, and it's correct online. But I just know if you're reading your hard copy that we initially sent out, it would be an error.
Okay.
Councillor Van Passen.
Just to Councillor Columbus's point, again, I'm going back to this would be only in effect as long as we are in a state of emergency. And it would only be, we have to have some faith in our CAO that it's for a very time-sensitive situation where a decision needs to be made immediately. I could think of the scenario where the province has ordered 15,000 ventilators and get a phone call one day, do you want to have 20 ventilators? This is the price, because if you don't want them, we're selling them to the next guy. It allows the CAO to say yes or no and not have to go through the actual process, because yes, we can have a council meeting, but there is a notice period for the council meeting. There is a few days delay. By that time, we might be too late. And I'm assuming that that's the only scenario that I could see our CAO using these powers is when there's an absolute necessity to make a decision immediately, and we have to have some faith that he'll make the right one. So.
Well, just to supplement that faith, I mean, even the decisions or the powers that I'm granted under the state of emergency, I think Jason and I both would prefer to bring them to council, because when this is all over, I'm sure there will be decisions, that some won't agree with, and that way we're all in it together as opposed to just Jason or just myself. So the ideal situation is to bring it back to council and have it be a collective decision. It's just to use to expedite things when it's critical that we move forward with them. Any further questions? Okay, does somebody wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative. Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Michele. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, my apologies. I guess Andy's got to do it.
Sorry. So we'll start with the online participants. Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Michele, sorry I missed you there.
Yes.
And Mayor Chop.
Yes.
I don't have the line of sight, sorry. It passed.
Okay, so moving on to bylaws, I just want to pull out, actually, page 91, bylaw 20-18 for further discussion. So, if I could have a mover, unless, if there's any other issues for anyone? Any others? Okay, if I could have a mover and a seconder that bylaws 2020-17 and then 2020-19 to 2020-27 inclusive be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk and affixed with the corporate seal. Mover and seconder, Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Columbus, sorry?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, perhaps you didn't see me. I did have a question with respect to salvage. And I don't know if Paula is there, but she was going to look at what the County of Parliament has with respect to people running salvage yards inside residential subdivisions. And I don't know when that's coming forward. Perhaps the CEO can reach out to her and get...
Can we get through the bylaws? Is that okay? And then...
Sure, okay.
Okay. So right now, again, bylaws 2020-2017, and then bylaw, we're going to skip bylaw 2020-18. So it'll be 2020-17 and then 2020-19 to 2020-27. Inclusive be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk and affixed with the corporate seal. Mover was Councillor Rabbit, seconded by, no seconder, Councillor Michele. Councillor Columbus? Second. Do you have a question, Councillor Columbus, or were you seconding that?
Both. Yeah, is this where I can bring up the issue with salvage yards and residential subdivisions?
Which bylaw was it? I can pull it then.
It's the licensing bylaw.
Okay, so just if you had a number for me.
Well, it's on page 5, I guess, but...
Okay, so, great. I just needed a bylaw number. So in that case then, while Jason gets a hold of Paula, we'll redo this one more time. That bylaw 2020-17, 2020-19, 2020-20, and then 2020-22 to 2020-27 inclusive be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk and fixed with the corporate seal. Okay, moved by Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Huffman. And Andy, you'll do a recorded vote.
Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Michele.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Mayor Chop.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's
Yes.
carried. Sorry, unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, so while we're still waiting for Paula, we'll start with the first one that I pulled. That was 2020-2018, page 91. So this is an bylaw to amend bylaw 20-2010 to provide for the levying of the 2020 interim tax levy. So number one, we have the first installment. We had deferred it to April 30th, and the second installment to be due May 29th. One of the proposals is discussed with finance, has been just looking for council's feedback here to defer that. Now that the province has indicated that we're able to defer payment of our education portion of the levy, that we move to defer it to July 31st. Any discussion on that? Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. The first installment or the second
The
installment?
first and second would both be due on July 31st.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Van Passen.
Just on the provincial deferral, we still have to pay them the first payment, and it's the second and third payments that are deferred, right?
Sorry, through the chair, you're talking about the educational portion? Yeah, they have deferred the second and third, but the first has already been dealt with.
Further questions, discussion? Councillor Van Passen.
Just as a matter of simplicity, rather than defer and send new bills, if we just made them all, like when the second interim installment was due, just make the whole thing due at that time? Is that, or is it just as much trouble to do that as anything else?
Through the chair, by making it July 31st, that's how the finance team thought it was easiest to execute, because then it would be on the bill for starting August 1st. Or July 31st is a Friday, so whatever the next business day for August is. So that's the intent, is that both installments are due on that date.
Anyone online there? Councillor Columbus?
I did say that I'm good with it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, in that case, did somebody wish to move that with that amendment, or did you want to move the proposal that's in the bylaw as it stands? Councillor Rabbits.
I would like to move the amendment, and for those watching at home, we had a bit of a back and forth. What we're proposing is that both of the tax installments, they would be due by July 31st.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Van Passen.
What was that date exactly, the 29th?
July 31st, 2020. First and second installments would be due.
That'd be the Friday, right?
All those in favor? Or, sorry, Andy.
If there's no objection, we'll put both of them together. Yeah. So that the bylaw be amended so that both dates read July 31st, 2020, and that bylaw 2018 be approved as amended. And then we'll go, Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Michele.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Mayor Chop.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Paula. Councillor Columbus, did you...
Madam Mayor, just a question. How will we inform the public that we're deferring the date to the 31st?
Well, I suspect we've got Monty here, so it'll certainly be in the paper, I would imagine. And any other thoughts of?
Yeah, through the chair, we use full media, so our Twitter, Facebook, our media partners. We also, when we did the first deferral, we did receive a number of phone calls inquiring about that. So we will continue to make, the normal approaches that we had. As my update said, on the first deferral, we noticed about a 10% uptake on the use of the deferral. So we'll continue to do the same public notification.
Thank you.
Okay, did you want to pose your question to Paula now that she's here, Councillor Columbus?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Paula, back some time ago when we were discussing the licensing bylaws, the question was asked about salvage yards and those who have scrap businesses as home occupations in residential subdivisions. Has any work been done on that, or I take it this bylaw we have here does not cover that type of scenario?
So, thank you for that question. As you might imagine, I have not had time to look specifically into that. What, as I recall, we discussed at Scrappers, and my memory of that conversation was more around enforcement under existing bylaws. For example, I was going to consider whether the property standards bylaw was an option, although I didn't think it was likely to be, or if there was potentially something under the clean yard bylaw, for example. That was a very different question, though, than a licensing question, which I think is distinct, and I think I have not had an opportunity to look into it from a licensing perspective either. I didn't actually recognize that was your primary question. I had left the conversation thinking it was an enforcement question and whether we needed a new bylaw to deal with that activity.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I realize that you've been very busy. There's one of these in place in Haldimand County that I'm aware of. I don't know the exact details, but I know they have one. What happens is when the bylaw officer gets called out, they're actually operating as a home occupation, and they kind of find a loophole to proceed with scrapping, and then they, of course, all the neighbors in close proximity get pretty upset about this type of operation, because it sometimes goes on in the late hours of the evening.
So just to make sure I understand.
If and when you get some time, if you could maybe look at Haldimand's bylaw, and maybe we could come up with.
So through the mayor, thank you, Councillor Columbus. What I will do is, now that I've gotten to know the manager of bylaws so very well in Haldimand, I will be sure to reach out to him, to speak to him, as well as to speak to our clerk to just be sure I understand the framework in our licensing bylaw.
Thanks for that.
Okay, so then in that case, if we could have a motion to, why don't I just let you take it over, Andy? Sorry, which number?
The motion would be that bylaw 2017 be approved, moved by Councillor Martin. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm wondering if Andy can back it up as well and speak a little bit more to the mobile food premise and other food premises in general. When this bylaw and report came to council, I was actually chairing the meeting. I didn't have an opportunity to speak to it. Additionally, I know that a lot of the changes came from you, and Steph wasn't able to necessarily speak to a lot of it in full. Are you able to just give me a quick update on the changes that have been put into this bylaw, if any, with regards to the licensing for mobile food premises as well as regular businesses?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Chop. I just have to refresh my memory because it's not what it used to be. I think there haven't been large changes to the mobile food premise one. I do know that we have added some more general stuff related to asking for the removal of ones that are in unsafe positions, but we kind of did that in a judicious way to not impact people that had existing businesses. We looked at that as options to enhance it, but that was really the only change we did to the food ones, the mobile.
Okay, thank you. So there are no changes to the bylaw for the regular food licensing license that people come into the clerk's office and get at this time, because we also had a discussion around changing payment frequency and types of payment.
Yeah, so that is the one thing that we changed across the board. It's not specific to them, but we just are looking to allow people different payment options. So if people want to get a 2-year license and come in and prepay, then we are allowing that now. And we're also pursuing other options such as online. But some of that is part of our regular business plan that we don't know where it's going to go now. But in the interim, it would be nice to have those types of options for people. But we're trying to be as flexible as possible, especially with business licensing. So if with our taxi one, we're extending and dealing with a lot of that. But with other ones, if businesses are operating and they're closed down, we're certainly trying to be lenient and work with them and make sure that there's not enforcement going on.
Thank you. I think the tow truck and taxi license changes were very well received when the report came forward. There was still some discrepancy around food licensing and mobile food premises, but from what I'm hearing, the mobile food premises will help brick and mortar businesses and protect them a little bit more. It's probably the other one that concerns me a bit more, but I think if your office is committing to some flexibility and some different payment schedules, that maybe we'll be able to iron some of that out. Thank you, Andy.
Did you want to go ahead with the motion?
That bylaw 2017 be approved.
Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Van Passen.
So, Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Michele.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens.
Yes.
Mayor Chop.
Yes.
Yes.
Carried.
Okay, so moving on, I guess we originally had it in as number 6, which was the drain construction financial and project status update. Jason, did you want to touch on that now?
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair, and I apologize for the delay in this memo, but for those in the room, I think it's been distributed. For those online, I sent an email out with a memo. It's staff's recommendation that due to the ongoing pandemic, we suspend the billings that we had put out in collection until September 2020. We'll reissue the billings. The reason for this is twofold. One is obviously there has been some question of delaying payments during this pandemic, and we certainly appreciate that fact. Secondly, we've received questions on the billings, and it takes some time and effort to respond to those questions and to investigate those questions, which takes staff time away from things in the EOC. So what I'm suggesting is to move it off. I'm also going to have staff audit the process because there needs to be improvements in the drainage process. And we'll use that time to make sure that there's good improvements when we go back to reissue the billings in September. We will notify all the affected parties. We're working on a mail merge right now to send that out to them to notify them of this change if council approves it.
Okay, so the motion that we had prepared for this reads as follows, that staff be directed to cease the billing and collection of drainage accounts until September 2020, and further that staff are directed to notify the impacted parties of this decision as soon as possible. Is there any discussion on this, Councillor Van Passen?
I'd be happy to move that motion. That would probably stop my phone from ringing a whole lot, and I would appreciate that. So.
Councillor Martin, seconded? Excellent. Any further discussion? Councillor Martin?
I would just like to second Councillor Van Passen and actually thank him for helping me with some of my phone calls about drainage concerns. Obviously, we can't anticipate a pandemic, but I think that this went out with poor timing to the public, and we were looking to clean up an old file, but it's stressful times for people, and I would really appreciate the delay of this. So thank you.
All right. Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Michele.
Yes.
Councillor Huffman.
Yes.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes.
Councillor Rabbits.
Yes?
Councillor Geisens.
Councillor White. Right, again, I'm always late.
Yeah, so the vote on the motion.
On the drainage, to defer the payments until September 2020. Just looking for your vote.
Yes, I don't know why I've said it twice now already, and I read sign, so I guess we're losing it. Maybe I gotta do something different, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Geisens.
We'll note, Mayor Chop.
Yes.
It's carried.
So moving on then, we don't have it listed here on the agenda, but in terms of other business, if councillors had anything else they wanted to say or some questions, this is the opportunity. Councillor Michele.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, are we referring to, I just noticed this moment, actually, as you mentioned that we do not have general announcements on this agenda. Is that what you're referring to right now?
So I'm just putting it on there. I'm asking now if you have any questions. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment.
A statement's fine, too.
If that's all right. Just happy to report that the SWIFT initiative for Norfolk County, construction has started in Turkey Point, and that was going, pretty well. Obviously, it has just recently been halted by the recent provincial requirement that construction be stopped, but I am very happy that it is actually a couple of months ahead of schedule. So that's part of some, I hope, very good news for Norfolk County in light of all of the bad news we've been getting lately. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Michele. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Councillor Martin.
Nothing that hasn't already been said today, Mayor Chop, but I did want to just extend thanks and heartfelt wishes to all of our staff and our first responders because it's Easter weekend, and I just didn't want to say ditto to Mayor Chop there, but thank you for everything our team's doing.
Anyone else? Any staff members? Councillor Huffman, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Again, it has been said, but I do want to thank everyone within Norfolk County, staff and residents, for doing their part. I encourage everyone to continue to do their part. I know that this weekend will be difficult for many people, not being able to gather with individuals who do not live inside their homes, to not get together for Easter. But I strongly encourage everyone to hang in there and let's get through this Easter weekend and abide by the rules, and we'll continue to work on planking this curve.
Thanks, Councillor Huffman. I guess just the only other thing I wanted to add was that I asked Megan to prepare just a one-pager for all of you that has everything from the enforcement hotline to who to contact if you want to volunteer, to who to contact if you want to donate, so that it's one-stop shopping when you need to answer questions from your constituents. So that should be available to you, I would assume, by the end of the day here. And I guess, Councillor Huffman, actually you took my final words out of my mouth, which was also to thank all of the residents for doing their part, and to those that aren't, to urge them to join us to be able to beat this as quickly as possible and get back to things as normal. So thank you to everyone. Yes, Councillor Martin.
Councillor Columbus.
Councillor Columbus, sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question I have is, we've had a number of vacancies over the last few months in senior positions. I wonder if we could council could get an update in a closed memo or however, on how we're doing with filling those vacancies. I guess that's for Mr. Burgess.
Sure. Through the chair, there has been a couple of postings that have closed for some senior positions, and I'll certainly communicate that out. One of the things we may evaluate is whether the uptake on the participation in the job postings may have been adversely affected by the pandemic, and whether we want to take a look at putting it back out again or not. But I will provide a memo on key hiring positions.
That's great.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Just in case people are watching this and haven't been watching the news as much lately, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit opened yesterday, and the CRA website has all the eligibility criteria and details regarding that. So if you are in need, do please go check out the website and you can see your criteria. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Abbots.
Thank you. Through you. I'd be remiss if I didn't give my thanks as well to all of our frontline workers and all of our staff. I have to say, in business life and leading up to a plant shutdown, talking about my other hat here, working at Tayutetsu, large employer, 1,000 employees, mostly residing and working in Norfolk County, but many commuting quite far to work in our community. And I have to say, it was a real struggle for those that were experiencing a layoff to apply for EI, many for the first time. Millions of Canadians, across the country were flooding those servers all at the same time, flooding those phones, and I know telehealth went down for a period of time with the province. And while those systems were being overwhelmed this last week, I did have many employees and many people approach me and tell me about the quick response they're getting from our local health unit here, while many of those other offices, whether they be Service Canada or otherwise, were closed, or their phones weren't on, or no one was getting back to those individuals that were reaching out. I have to say that the response in Norfolk County was well organized, and people were getting their phone calls returned quite promptly. Folks were going through the screening at the health department within 12, 24 hours of them contacting. Many of these phone calls coming in at odd hours. We're dealing with shift workers, and I just wanted to reiterate how appreciative I am and how appreciative those factory workers are, and all of the residents in Norfolk County that approached me outside of work life, that they were able to get through the local health unit, to get screened, and many also to get tested as well. So I just wanted to pay kudos where kudos are due, and I think we've had a tremendous response to date. We need to keep that up. This is going to be a rough week for us, and I think the next couple weeks leading into the next couple months are going to be very difficult across the nation and in the province of Ontario specifically. So let's hang in there and let's keep up the good work to date. Social distance, wash your hands, self-isolate if need be. And if you're not in the same household as individuals, you really shouldn't be meeting and seeing each other only for delivering essential goods and services, foods and medicines. These are the reasons why we should be leaving the home this week. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Abbots. All right, with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Michelli, that bylaw 20-28, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Norfolk County at the special council meeting held on the 7th day of April 2020, be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, you don't need a recorded vote for that, do you? All those in favor?
We could say it's procedural.
Roger, perfect. Councillor Taylor? Council's adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess for those at home that were watching, we will provide notice for the next council meeting. That hasn't been decided as of yet when that will be. In all likelihood, we'll be looking to combine meetings. If we have to have a Board of Health meeting, will be combined on the same day, obviously, as our council, and if we need any public hearings to be held and so on, we have to figure out a way to do that still.
I hope we'll have a process in place for public hearings at the start of May, so we'll be working towards that.
So we'll be in touch with a date for our next council meeting.
What I love most about Norfolk County, I think, would be the vastness of the county, how it's big and there's breathing space, and there are so many little pockets of beauty, natural beauty.
I love the seasons here. The springtime, the rain falling on the earth. I'm a farmer, so I enjoy those aspects of it, the smell of the rain. The summer times, we have beautiful warm summers here.
You have such pristine water here. You have some of the finest cold water streams in Ontario with Big Creek and Youngs Creek and others that produce great fishing.
Norfolk is very heavily forested, beautiful color in the autumn. The sun shines very brightly here in the wintertime, so I love the 4 distinct seasons we have here in Norfolk County.
What people find remarkable about Norfolk County, I think, is that our sense of community and us working together.
I think of us as a little bit of, we have these ecospheres in our store. They're these self-sustaining little balls that, you know, completely take care of themselves. We're a little bit like that, you know, in our area. We have so much here.
My kids grow up knowing what it's like to produce a piece of fruit or produce some food, some vegetables, and put them on the table, how much effort that takes. And I think that's important.
When people come into the shop, we pull out the map and we show them the wineries and the breweries, and we tell them about the local dining in town, and we'll tell them about the lavender farm, and along the way show them produce stands that they could stop to pick up some goodies.
Everything that we want to do socially and all of our extracurricular activities are right here. And when you join groups, these people they'll want to get to know you immediately. That's our nature. We're curious and we're supportive and we're interested.
Sometimes opportunity just kind of happens when you're talking to someone and having a conversation with someone here in Norfolk. The next thing you know, you're collaborating with them on a project or activity.
The amount of people within our community that support our business is outstanding, because it's a give and take relationship. If you support everyone else, they will support you, and it makes our community that much stronger and that much better.
You know, I think that working with the local businesses here, everyone's very welcoming. Every time I meet a new business owner, and I love to go to new stores and new restaurants that open up and introduce ourselves and welcome them to the community. It's easy to fall in love with Norfolk County.